Here's section 1 of your story, written as a flowing narrative with no headings, no asterisks, and carefully balanced pronoun use. I've aimed for around 1600 words to give you a strong foundation. The wind howled across the shattered ridges of the old frontier, dragging fine particles of rust-colored dust into the abandoned village. Cale Draven stood at the edge of what had once been a thriving outpost, his cloak gathered tight against the chill, his eyes scanning the crumbled stone and scorched steel. Silence lay heavy here. It was not the silence of peace but the kind born of eradication, a stillness that lingered after every life had been cut short. He had returned to this place against every instinct, called back by men who still believed in him, or perhaps only feared him enough to beg. For years he had lived in shadow, far from the reach of command or nation, far from the voices that had once directed his hand toward death. Cale Draven, once the knife in the dark that enemies whispered of, had abandoned the name assassin in pursuit of anonymity. He had not found peace. The ghosts had followed him wherever he wandered. Now, those same ghosts had drawn him here. The ruins bore the mark of alien fire. Jagged burns carved through the outer walls where plasma cannons had gutted defenses in mere minutes. He crouched near the remnants of a gate tower and brushed his fingers over the blackened stone. The heat was gone, but he could still imagine the roar of collapse, the screams of those who had not escaped in time. His jaw tightened. Boot steps approached behind him, measured and deliberate. Cale did not need to look to know the pattern. Commander Yarrick Thorne carried himself like every battlefield was a parade ground, back stiff, stride heavy with the weight of authority. When the man spoke, his voice came low and controlled, but with a resonance meant to command obedience. "You came." Cale remained crouched, studying the charred marks on the stone. "You brought me here. I sent for you. There's a difference." Yarrick stopped a few paces away, boots grinding into ash. "I wasn't sure you would answer. I wasn't sure I would either." Cale rose slowly, turning toward him. The commander's face was lined, scarred along the left cheek, the mark of an explosion he had survived a decade ago. His uniform bore fresh dust from travel, but the insignia gleamed, polished as though he still believed order could survive amidst chaos. Cale's gaze was harder. "Tell me what I'm looking at." Yarrick gestured to the ruins. "The advance of a god. At least that's what they call him. Verath Kor. The foreign war god. His armies came through the outer rim 3 months ago, sweeping aside every fleet we set against him. This was one of the last frontier holds. It fell in less than a day." Cale's eyes narrowed. The name carried a weight of arrogance and fear. He had heard fragments, reports carried by refugees, rumors traded in hushed taverns, but nothing concrete. A conqueror claiming divinity was not new. The ones who survived long enough to inspire fear were usually something worse. "Why tell me?" Cale asked. "Because armies can't stop him," Yarrick said. "Every time we assemble a force, it's broken. Every tactic we use, he has already unraveled. He doesn't lead like a man. He commands like inevitability itself. Soldiers follow because they believe he cannot be defeated. They kneel before him as though surrender were faith." Cale studied the commander's steady eyes, searching for the lie. There was none. Yarrick believed every word, and worse, Cale could sense he believed it because he had witnessed it. "You want me to kill your god," Cale said finally. "I want you to remind the universe that gods bleed," Yarrick replied. The words landed heavier than any weapon. Cale turned away, cloak shifting against the dust. He had killed leaders before. He had ended generals, dismantled kings, silenced prophets whose voices stirred armies. He had earned his legend with steel and silence. But he had left all of it behind. "Find another blade," Cale said quietly. "None are sharp enough," Yarrick countered. "You're the only one who can do this. You've lived in shadows so long you've become one. You can strike where armies fall." Cale's lips curled faintly, a humorless ghost of a smile. "I'm not your salvation. I'm the echo of what you fear." Before Yarrick could reply, another voice rang out, younger, and tempered by age. "And that's exactly what we need." Lieutenant Darius Vale came into view, stepping from behind a broken archway. His armor was battered but intact, his posture firm despite the exhaustion of travel. Unlike Yarok, he carried no scars of age or command, only the sharpened brightness of youth. His eyes, however, fixed on Kale with an intensity that spoke of long-cherished legends. "I grew up hearing stories about you," Darius said, his tone neither mocking nor shy. "They said you could vanish in a crowd, kill a man before he blinked, and disappear before his body hit the ground. They said entire wars shifted when you chose your targets." "Stories are lies polished into truth," Kale said coldly. "Maybe. But you're standing here, and this ruin says otherwise. If even half the stories are real, then you're the weapon we need." Kale regarded him silently. There was no arrogance in the lieutenant's voice, only conviction, the kind that drew young men to throw their lives at impossible battles. He turned back toward the ruins, unwilling to meet that gaze any longer. Yarok's tone softened. "Kale, listen. This isn't about duty, or glory, or even victory. The war god won't stop until every world burns. He doesn't conquer, he annihilates. If you stay in hiding, you'll watch from afar as nothing remains to hide in. This war will find you, whether you fight or not." Kale's eyes drifted across the wreckage. His throat tightened when he saw a collapsed wall still half buried in stone. A charred mark rested near the base, a symbol he recognized, the crest of a squad he had once served beside, men who had fought with him during the silent wars. He had thought them long retired, safe in this frontier outpost. Now the ashes spoke otherwise. The silence stretched until Kale finally broke it. "They were here." Yarok hesitated. "Yes. They held as long as they could. None survived." Kale's jaw locked, though his expression betrayed nothing. The air seemed to thin around him. He crouched once more and pressed his palm against the crest, fingers curling tight as though trying to drag the memory of the fallen from the dust itself. When he rose, his voice was low but unyielding. "Then the war god has already taken too much from me." Yarok inclined his head slightly. "Then you'll fight." Kale's gaze flicked between them. He saw the hard pragmatism in Yarok's stance and the burning belief in Darius's eyes. Both looked at him not as a man but as an answer, a blade they prayed would cut through inevitability. He despised the weight of expectation, yet the fire burning behind his ribs demanded blood. "I'll fight," he said. "But not for your command, and not for your faith. I'll fight because I have debts to settle with the dead." Neither Yarok nor Darius spoke. The commander only nodded, his expression unreadable. The lieutenant's mouth tightened in restrained triumph, though he remained silent. Kale turned from them and walked toward the remnants of a buried cellar near the ridge. The stones gave way under his strength, revealing a hidden cache sealed long ago. He opened it with practiced motions, dust falling away to reveal a long black case. The sight of it stirred something he had buried deeper than memory. He opened the case. Inside lay 2 blades forged of alloy and silence, their edges dulled by time but still holding the sheen of lethality. They were not swords or crude weapons but compact, extendable blades designed for concealment, for precision, for killing before a target ever realized death had arrived. He lifted one, the weight familiar as an old scar. The air seemed colder as he slid the blade across his forearm, letting it lock into the hidden harness beneath his sleeve. The second followed, vanishing into the folds of his cloak until only the faintest outline betrayed their presence. His heartbeat steadied. His breath slowed. The assassin had returned. Behind him, Darius exhaled softly, as though witnessing something both terrifying and holy. Yarok remained silent, knowing this moment belonged to no one else. Kale closed the case and left it buried in dust. He straightened, cloak settling around him. His eyes burned with a clarity not seen since his exile. "If a god has come for humanity," he said, voice low and final, "then let him bleed like any other." The words hung in the air long after silence returned to the ruins. The wind howled once more, but now it carried a different weight, as though it knew shadows had begun to move again. Kale Draven, the assassin who had once haunted the darkest corners of war, had taken up his blades once more. Somewhere beyond the stars, a self-proclaimed god would soon learn what it meant to face the man who had killed legends. The battlefield was not a place for men but for machines and monsters. Skies bled orange from the glow of orbital fire, and the ground trembled under the constant march of alien war engines. Kale moved through the chaos like a phantom, slipping between firestorms that could erase entire platoons, his cloak flickering with the shadows of death. Human soldiers fought desperately around him, their lines crumbling beneath the weight of armored beasts and plasma storms, but wherever he passed, alien commanders fell, their deaths sharp and surgical, their armies thrown into confusion for precious moments. Those who saw him never forgot. Some whispered his name like a prayer. Others recoiled as if from a curse. He did not seek their reverence, only their silence. Every strike, every cut, was for the dead he carried, not for the living who watched. Yarrick observed from the command trench, his jaw tight as he studied the shifting battle through tactical lenses. His formations had already bent farther than he dared, casualties climbing by the hour, yet his eyes returned again and again to the lone figure weaving through the carnage. Kale Draven was more than a man, he was disruption given flesh, a weapon honed for the kind of war Yarrick hated but now needed. He felt both relief and unease watching him work. Darius crouched at his side, armor scorched from his latest skirmish. His breathing came ragged, his youth evident in the frantic rise and fall of his chest, but his gaze remained locked on Kale. Where Yarrick saw necessity, Darius saw possibility. He watched Kale carve through alien soldiers as though their weapons meant nothing, each strike measured, each movement efficient to the point of artistry. For the young lieutenant, it was not just battle, it was witnessing what humanity could become when stripped of hesitation. "He moves like a shadow," Darius murmured. "He moves like a man who has killed too many to forget," Yarrick replied. His voice held no admiration, only the weight of grim recognition. The enemy pressed harder. Alien juggernauts thundered forward, their armor gleaming with the eerie violet light of otherworldly alloys. Human shells ricocheted harmlessly from their frames, while plasma fire scythed through bunkers as if they were paper. The soldiers around Yarrick faltered, despair creeping into their faces. Then one of the juggernauts collapsed, its armored head caved inward from within, smoke rising from a single seam cut with precision. Panic rippled through the alien ranks. No human weapon had touched it. Only Kale had. Yarrick caught the shift in morale instantly. Soldiers who moments before had nearly broken now surged forward, their battle cries carried with renewed vigor. Hope had returned on the edge of a blade. He turned sharply to Darius. "Tell your men to press the left flank. While the beasts are distracted, we drive them back. Do it now." Darius saluted, his armor grinding as he sprang into action, shouting orders, his voice echoing above the din. His youth lent his commands a raw fire that caught in the hearts of his unit. They charged, rallying behind their lieutenant, and the line held for another hour that otherwise would have been lost. Kale returned only when the worst of the wave had broken. He appeared soundlessly at the edge of the trench, cloak torn, blade stained with alien ichor that hissed faintly as it ate into the dust. He did not look at Yarrick or Darius, only at the horizon where the enemy still gathered, endless and patient. "That was only a vanguard," Kale said. His voice was calm, but the words cut like stone. "The war god hasn't moved yet." Yarrick forced himself to meet those eyes. "If you're right, then all we've done is survive long enough to be crushed when he decides to end this." "Then we don't wait," Kale replied. "We move first." Darius approached, sweat streaking his dirt-stained face. "Strike at him? Now? With what? Half our men are dead or dying. The rest are hanging on by your name alone." His eyes darted to Kale, a mixture of awe and desperation. Unless you mean you." Kale's silence was answer enough. Yarrick stepped closer, his hand tightening into a fist. "You don't face gods with daggers, Draven. You might frighten his soldiers, you might cut down his generals, but the war god himself. He's more than a target. He's the will of an empire made flesh. You think slipping a blade into his throat will change that?" Kale's eyes were sharp, unflinching. "I don't think. I know. I've ended men who built empires on belief. When their bodies hit the ground, so did the empires. Faith dies when its idol bleeds." Darius's breath caught, his youth clashing with the enormity of Kale's words. He wanted to believe, but even belief strained beneath the idea of striking down something worshipped as divine. Still, when he looked at Kale, He could not deny the certainty in his tone, the way conviction sat in him like an unmovable stone. Night fell heavy across the ruined field, but battle did not relent. The aliens pressed without exhaustion, their discipline unnerving. Human troops rotated shifts, tending wounds by torchlight, praying their defenses would hold until dawn. In the command shelter, Yarrick studied maps flickering with failing light, calculating the hours until collapse. Every number ended in defeat. Kale stood at the edge, silent, his presence a darker weight than the failing lamp. When Yarrick finally looked up, the assassin's eyes were fixed on him. "You know I'm right," Kale said. Yarrick exhaled slowly. "I know you'll try, whether I send you or not. But you won't go alone. I won't have this entire army resting on the chance of one man's arrogance." Darius, who had been half dozing against a wall, stirred. "Then send me." Both older men turned toward him. His armor was dented, his skin marked by burns, but his eyes blazed with determination. If he's going into the heart of their war machine, then someone needs to be at his side. "I've seen him fight. I've seen how he moves. I can learn. I can follow." Kale studied him for a long moment. The boy's conviction was strong, his courage undeniable, but courage was a blade that dulled quickly in blood. Still, Kale saw something else, a reflection of what he had once been before the years and the kills had ground him into silence. Yarrick's voice cut through. "You'll follow orders, Vale. You're no use to me dead chasing legends." "With respect, Commander," Darius said, straightening, "we're all dead if the war god isn't stopped. If I can help him stop it, then that's the only order worth following." The air grew taut, the kind of silence that clung before decisions changed the course of wars. Kale broke it with a single nod. "He comes. But he carries his own weight. If he falters, he dies." Darius's jaw clenched, but he nodded once, accepting without hesitation. Yarrick stared at them both, a commander watching reason slip through his grasp. Yet deep inside, even he felt the faint stir of something dangerous and necessary. If this was the path, then he would shape it to the bitter end. By dawn, the decision had already become reality. Kale led small infiltration strikes into enemy positions, dismantling supply convoys, silencing alien officers, turning the tide of smaller battles with the precision of his blades. Darius followed, his movements clumsy at first, too loud, too eager, but under Kale's silent guidance he sharpened. Each raid hardened him, stripped away hesitation, taught him the ruthless economy of survival. The soldiers began to speak of them. Not just the ghost in the cloak, but the shadow and his echo. Rumors spread faster than fear. For every alien commander who fell, another story was born, and the legend of Kale Draven grew like fire in dry grass. Even Yarrick, hardened against superstition, found himself relying on that legend, sending orders with the quiet hope that Kale's presence would make them succeed. But the war god had noticed. His forces adapted, his patrols grew thicker, his commanders more cautious. Reports came of his colossal figure glimpsed at the front, towering in armor that shone like a fallen star. His presence bled into every skirmish, a looming inevitability. Soldiers whispered not just his name but his gaze, claiming it could crush courage with a glance. One night, as Kale cleaned his blades beneath the fractured light of a burning sky, Darius approached. His voice was quieter than usual, stripped of youthful bravado. Towered over them, his body encased in armor that shimmered like liquid starfire. His frame was colossal, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of empires. In his hand rested a weapon that writhed with energy, a spear alive with hungry flame. His eyes glowed with violet fire, fixed upon them with the calm of inevitability. "Do you ever wonder if he really is a god?" Kale did not look up. "I've killed men who claimed to be gods. Their blood was red like mine. That's all I need to know." Darius fell silent, watching the faint gleam of alien ichor on steel. He wanted to believe as Kale believed, but belief was harder when the figure they hunted seemed more than flesh. Yarrick entered then, his face grim. "Scouts report the war god moves toward us. Not just his army, him. He's coming to crush the last of us himself." The words struck like a thunderclap. The camp went silent. Even whispers faltered. Kale rose, blade sliding into his sleeves once more. His voice was steady, cold as the void between stars. "Then it's time we meet." The alien fortress rose from the scorched plain like a wound in the earth, its jagged towers of black alloy piercing the sky with cruel geometry. Around it, war engines crawled on segmented limbs, hissing with the energy of weapons not built by human hands. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with currents of violet light, as if the fortress itself breathed with the rhythm of its god. Soldiers whispered that stepping too close to its gates made the heart falter, as though courage itself bent beneath the presence housed within. Kale stood in the shadow of a ridge, eyes fixed on the structure. He had studied fortresses before, had dismantled them with blades, fire, and silence, but this was something different. The fortress was not only built to withstand war, it was built to exalt the figure who commanded it. It was a throne, a stage, and a weapon all at once. Behind him, Darius adjusted his rifle uneasily, though they both knew it was useless against what they were here to face. His voice was low but strained. "That's where he is." Kale did not answer. He already knew. He could feel it in the air, in the way the soldiers fought harder near this place, as if emboldened by proximity to their god. Fear and faith were twin blades, sharper than steel. He had dulled both before, but never at this scale. Yarok crouched beside them, studying troop movements through his visor. His shoulders were set in grim determination. "Our army can't reach that fortress. Every approach is suicide. Patrols sweep the fields, and the walls are impregnable without siege engines we don't have." He turned his gaze toward Kale, his words hard and deliberate. "If this is to be done, it has to be done now. Quietly. Before he decides to come to us." Kale's expression did not change, but his silence was consent. Darius exhaled sharply, trying to calm his nerves, but his hands tightened on his weapon. The boy had chosen this path, though the weight of it pressed more heavily with every step closer to the god they sought. They moved under cover of night, shadows cutting across broken ground. Kale led without hesitation, weaving through patrols with movements so fluid the aliens never sensed him until his blades whispered across their throats. Darius followed, imitating his every step, learning not through words but through silence and survival. Yarok covered the rear, his years of command guiding him to see dangers before they appeared. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. The walls of the fortress loomed higher, the glow of violet energy casting long, unnatural shadows across the plain. Every soldier they killed seemed to fall without sound, swallowed by the hunger of this place. At the base of the fortress, they found the gate. It was no ordinary barrier but a living construct, a vast maw of black alloy that shifted and pulsed as though aware of their presence. Darius's breath caught. "How do we even get through that?" Kale stepped forward, his blades gleaming faintly in the alien light. He studied the pattern of pulses, the rhythm of its breath, and without a word he struck at a seam with brutal precision. The blade slid between shifting plates, cutting into something that shrieked without voice. The gate shuddered, spasmed, then split open with a tearing wail that made the skin crawl. They entered. The interior was worse. Corridors twisted unnaturally, formed of the same black alloy, veins of violet energy pulsing along the walls like arteries. The air smelled of metal and burnt ozone, heavy with a presence that made Darius's stomach churn. The fortress was alive, and within it waited the one who called himself God. Kale moved without hesitation, as if the strange geometry meant nothing to him. His eyes traced patterns, his mind cutting through illusions and distractions. He had walked through worse, though never anything so eager to convince its intruders of their insignificance. They reached a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows, its floor marked with the remains of those who had tried before. Human armor lay broken beside alien carcasses, all equal in their defeat. At the center stood a figure so immense he seemed carved from the fortress itself. The war god. Verathkor T. Kale struck from the shadows with both blades, driving them into the seams of the war god's armor just beneath the shoulder. The alloy screamed as steel bit deeper than before, violet ichor bursting across the floor in a molten spray. Verathkor roared, the sound shaking the chamber like thunder. He twisted, his massive arm lashing back with a sweep of the living spear, but Kale was already moving, vanishing before the weapon carved through the stone. For the first time since the war began, the god bled. His colossal frame trembled with fury rather than pain, his glowing eyes narrowing on the assassin who dared to wound him. He turned slowly, his gaze burning through the darkness. "You are no man," he growled, voice resonating through the walls. "You are defiance made flesh." Kale said nothing. His blades dripped alien fire as he circled, his cloak stirring faintly in the charged air. The wound he had opened was shallow, but it was enough. It proved the god could be cut. That was all he needed. Darius struggled to rise, leaning heavily against the fractured stone. His ribs burned with every breath, his body broken from the last strike, but his eyes locked on Kale with desperate intensity. He saw the assassin's movements, the precision of every step, and he understood that he was watching a duel between inevitability and resistance itself. He could not join it, but he could bear witness. Yarok pulled himself upright as well, blood soaking through his armor where the shockwave had torn into him. His vision blurred, but he forced his mind to remain sharp. He had led men through countless battles, watched them die under his command, yet never had he seen anything like this. Kale moved not as a man but as the embodiment of what humanity refused to surrender. The war god lunged, his weapon carving arcs of violet flame through the air. Kale darted aside, rolling low beneath the sweep, his blade striking again at the giant's leg. Sparks showered as one blade dug into the joint, twisting until metal shrieked. Veyrath staggered, catching himself with the shaft of his spear, rage boiling from his throat. "You think shadows can cut divinity," he bellowed. "I am more than flesh. I am eternity. Your kind is dust beneath my stride." Kale's voice was low, controlled, each word carried on steady breath. "Eternity ends the same way as flesh. At the edge of a blade." The giant lunged again, faster this time, his sheer weight cracking the stone as he brought the weapon down in a crushing blow. Kale leapt back, but the shockwave caught him, flinging him hard against the wall. His cloak tore, blood streaking from his mouth as he fell to one knee. The war god advanced, towering, weapon raised high. Darius screamed his name, but Kale lifted a hand to silence him without even looking. He pushed himself upright, one blade clutched tight, the other dragging faintly against the floor as though refusing to leave his side. His eyes never wavered. Veyratha's laugh rumbled like an earthquake. "Stand, bleed, fall. You are nothing. Humanity is nothing. This universe belongs to gods." Kale's reply was a whisper, but it carried across the chamber like steel drawn from a sheath. "Then bleed with us." He surged forward with sudden ferocity, slipping past the sweeping spear. His body twisted low, sliding beneath the god's guard, and his blades flashed upward in twin arcs. They pierced the exposed seams of the chest plate, biting into the thick armor and cutting deep into the living furnace beneath. Violet ichor burst forth, spraying across Kale's face and cloak, searing his skin with its unnatural heat. The war god roared in fury, his massive hand closing around Kale's side. Armor crumpled, bones cracked, and Kale felt the world lurch with the crushing force. Still he did not release the blades. He drove them deeper, twisting, his eyes locked on the burning gaze of the giant. Yarok staggered forward, his own weapon drawn though useless against such power. Darius dragged himself across the shattered floor, shouting, trying to reach them, but both knew they were too far. The duel was no longer theirs to touch. The war god raised Kale into the air, his armor groaning under the strain. "I will rip you apart, Shadow. I will scatter your pieces so no world remembers your defiance." Kale's voice came ragged, but iron still underlay each word. "You've already lost. They'll remember this." With the last of his strength, he tore one blade free and drove it upward, plunging it beneath the war god's helm, straight into the glowing throat. The steel pierced through divine flesh, and for a moment the chamber erupted with blinding light as though a star had collapsed within. The war god staggered, his roar breaking into a choking cry. His weapon fell, clattering against the stone with a sound that shook the fortress itself. His colossal frame shuddered, violet ichor spilling in torrents as his knees buckled. Still, his grip remained locked on Kale, dragging him down with him. Yarok shouted his name, Darius screamed until his voice broke, but Kale did not fight the fall. He held the blade buried in the god's throat, twisting until the light in Veyratha's eyes began to dim. The giant convulsed, a final attempt to rise, then collapsed, the impact splitting the chamber floor. Dust and fire erupted upward, swallowing both bodies in the storm. Silence followed. The fortress trembled as though mourning its master, the violet veins in the walls dimming one by one. The air grew lighter, the oppressive weight lifting. The soldiers outside, locked in desperate battle, felt it instantly. The presence that had driven them, the faith that had held them, was gone. The alien army faltered, confusion spreading like wildfire through their ranks. Inside the shattered chamber, Darius crawled toward the fallen mass, his breath ragged, his vision swimming. He reached the edge of the crater and saw the colossal body of the war god lying still, its armor cracked, its fire extinguished. Beside it, broken and blooded, Kale lay half-buried in stone, his cloak torn, his blade still locked in his grip. Darius pulled himself to him, hands trembling as he tried to move the debris. "Kale," he whispered, voice breaking. "Don't you die here. Don't you leave me to tell this story alone." Kale's eyes flickered open, the faintest trace of a smile on his blooded lips. His voice was barely audible, but Darius leaned close enough to hear. "Divinity ends at the edge of a blade." The words shuddered through him like a final oath. Kale's grip loosened, one blade slipping free to clatter against the stone. Darius caught it instinctively, his hand closing around the hilt. Yarrick stumbled to them, his own body failing, but his eyes wide with a commander's recognition of history being made. He looked at Kale not as a man but as something more, something that had carried humanity's defiance into the heart of divinity and returned victorious. Outside, the human army pressed forward. Alien formations shattered, their cohesion lost without the god they worshipped. Victory spread not by command but by instinct, every soldier sensing that the tide had turned. Humanity had survived the impossible. Darius remained at Kale's side as the battle ended, clutching the blade that still dripped with violet ichor. He did not weep, though his chest burned with grief. He understood now what Kale had been, not a man to be worshipped or feared, but the sharp edge of humanity's will. A shadow that had refused to fade, a ghost who had haunted gods until even they bled. When the dust finally settled, Yarrick stood tall despite his wounds. His voice carried across the ruins, heavy with reverence. History will call him assassin, monster, or savior. But we know what he was. He was our blade. Darius looked down at the weapon in his hand, the steel etched with scars of both human and alien blood. He tightened his grip, his voice low but certain. "Then I'll carry it. If he was the blade, I'll be the hand that keeps it moving." The chamber fell quiet again, save for the faint hum of a dying fortress. The body of the war god lay still, a monument to the end of false divinity. Beside it, the broken figure of Kale Draven rested, not in defeat but in the silence of victory. Above the battlefield, the sky cleared. Smoke drifted away to reveal distant stars, cold and eternal, yet somehow brighter for what had been won beneath them. Humanity had endured, not through armies or faith, but through one man who refused to bow. And though his voice was gone, his shadow remained, etched forever in the memory of those who had seen him rise against a god and carve eternity apart with hidden blades.